And I ran into Harvey in the parking lot at CBS, and I all but threw him across a fender or something, I don't know, or a hood of a car.
Carol Burnett has a reputation that feels almost untouchable. America's comedy sweetheart, the kind of star everyone swears is as warm off camera as she is on it. But that clip we just watched is a fun reminder that underneath the smile is a woman you probably don't want to push too far, because if you do, you might find yourself, quote, across a fender. Burnett built the Carol Burnett Show into a weekly comfort watch, full of musical moments, audience Q&A, and sketches that made the cast feel like a family you couldn't wait to visit. Harvey Korman was one of the key reasons it worked, a cornerstone of so many classic bits. That's why the idea that Burnett once fired him sounds like sitcom fan fiction, until you hear what really happened behind the scenes. Today we're unpacking the week the mood turned sour, the confrontation that spilled out of a dressing room, and the strict line Burnett drew that explains why she fired Harvey Korman from her show. The Sandbox and the people in it.
It's a very friendly, fun set. Harvey, God rest his soul, was a lot of fun, but he was always, something was wrong. Every day, he's got a problem.
The Carol Burnett Show launched in 1967 as a variety series that mixed musical numbers, audience interaction, and sketch comedy that often spoofed films and popular culture. Burnett was not just the star, she was the host, the glue, and the tone setter, shifting from sincere to silly in a heartbeat. From the beginning, the ensemble mattered as much as Burnett herself. Harvey Korman was there as a key co-star, and the regular cast also included Vicki Lawrence and Lyle Waggoner. The lineup became part of the show's identity, with recurring characters and a rhythm that depended on trust and timing. As the series evolved, the cast did too. Waggoner eventually left in 1974, and Tim Conway began taking a more central place, becoming one of the show's most beloved comedic forces. That transition worked because the group already had a shared language, and because the set functioned like a workplace where professionalism protected the fun. That last part is easy to forget when the finished product looks effortless. Variety shows are rehearsed hard, timed tightly, and sensitive to mood. When things go wrong, it's not just a personal issue, it can ripple into the performance, the guest experience, and the crew's ability to keep everything moving. The week, everything went sideways.
But this one week, he was a true curmudgeon. He was angry at something or whatever, and we were there that morning to pre-tape a musical number. And Petula Clark and Tim Conway were on as the guests. And I said, Tim, you've got Harvey, calm down. I'm upset and I don't even want to be on this show. And he was rude at one point. He was he made some remark to Petula, which was uncalled for. Well, that got the fur up here. I got, okay, you can step on me because I can take it, but you don't step on our guests. You don't behave that way.
When Carol Burnett says curmudgeon, you can practically hear the studio lights buzzing a little louder, because that is not a word you toss around unless the vibe was truly off. The incident she described lands around the 7th season during a week with guests who were about as low drama as it gets. Tim Conway was there at a time when he had not yet officially become a regular, and Petula Clark was also booked, both known for being friendly pros who show up ready to play. That's what made the tension stand out. Burnett remembered something being wrong with Harvey Korman during rehearsal, like he woke up on the wrong side of the soundstage and decided to stay there. She even recalled a detail that makes it feel like a movie scene. Korman was in an Elvis outfit that morning, which is funny on paper, but not so funny if the person wearing it is scowling through the whole run-through. In her telling, it wasn't quiet irritation that you ignore and hope passes. She described him as scowling at people, and she said he was rude to Conway and Clark. On a show that ran on trust and playfulness, snapping at guest stars was the kind of thing that instantly changed the temperature in the room. And Burnett's point was simple. The guests are not just visiting, they're part of the act. They're doing the show a favor by stepping into that sandbox, and it's the cast's job to make them feel safe enough to be funny. If a guest walks into tension, it can deflate a sketch before the cameras even roll. The dressing room door moment.
I decided I would just be Joan Crawford or somebody like that and go in and be the boss, because I was never that way. But so I told him, I said, you want to be off the show? Okay, you're off the show. Don't come back next week.
The second Burnett starts joking about channeling Joan Crawford, you know this is not a gentle, let's talk feelings conversation anymore. Even though she has said confrontation isn't her natural setting, she knew she had to address what was happening. So she went to Korman's dressing room to find out what was wrong. With a mix of concern and leadership that comes with running a show that literally has your name on it. Korman's response, at least the way Burnett later described it, didn't exactly invite a heart-to-heart. He told her to mind her own business, and when she pushed back by reminding him the show, the guests, and the atmosphere absolutely were her business, the argument escalated fast. Burnett described him insisting she couldn't dictate how he should feel or act, which is the kind of line that turns a bad mood into a full-on standoff. Then it hit a breaking point. She said he told her he'd just as soon go home and never come back after that night's show. Burnett also described him walking her backward into the hallway and closing the dressing room door on her, which matters because it's not just a disagreement, it's a public shutout in the middle of a workday. Instead of letting that hang in the air, Burnett made a quick, hard decision. She called Korman's agent and said he would be done with the Carol Burnett Show after that evening's performance. In that moment, it stops being a story about comedy chemistry and becomes a story about boundaries, especially when guests and crew are getting caught in the splash zone. The firing that turned into a deal.
When you come back next week, we all have our problems, but when you come back next week, I don't want you to bring your problems here. When I see you in the hall, I want you to whistle and be happy. And all. So we went home. I told everybody about, and he went across the street after the taping to the farmer's daughter, or there was a bar across the street from CBS, and everybody went there for drinks after the show, all the crew and everything. And Harvey got up on the counter, and said, "My queen fired me tonight. I love her."
If you've ever heard Burnett describe this part, it's almost like the firing comes with stage directions and a punchline, because she didn't just want an apology, she wanted a complete attitude makeover. After the show that night, she went back to Korman's dressing room and told him she had called his agent. The message underneath it was clear. His behavior had rattled her so badly, it bled into the performance, and she couldn't work under that kind of tension. Here's the twist people miss when they hear the headline, "She fired him." In Burnett's version, Korman stopped her before she left and asked what he could do to make it right. That's where it stops being vague regret and turns into a very specific agreement. Burnett's conditions were not about ego. They were about conduct. She told him that when he came back the next week, she wanted him cheerful, and not just for 5 minutes. She wanted it all week. And she laid down a firm rule that he was never, ever to be nasty to a guest or anyone on the crew. She also gave him an image he couldn't forget. Everybody has moods, she said, but you don't bring them to work, and it would make her happy to see him skipping around and whistling in the hall. Korman agreed, and they shook hands on it, turning what could have been a permanent breakup into a second chance with very sharp edges. Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky and the aftermath.
The next week, come Monday, and we're going to read this show in my dressing room. And I went to the ladies' room, and I came back out into the hall, and Harvey, the elevator door was opening, and he looked at me and he went, and skipped down the hall. So that Friday, we put a sign on his dressing room door saying, "Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky."
That Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky line sounds like a joke you'd put in a sketch, except in this case, it was Burnett basically describing a workplace experiment in real time. When Monday rolled around, she wasn't sure what she was going to get. Would Korman walk in awkward and quiet, or would he actually follow through on the whistling promise? According to Burnett, he went all in. The elevator doors opened, and there he was, smiling big, then skipping, dancing, and whistling down the hall toward her office. It's such an exaggerated visual that it almost feels staged, which is probably why it worked. It broke the tension and made it impossible to pretend nothing had happened. That kind of commitment did two things at once. It showed us he understood how serious the warning was, and it also let the set breathe again, because humor was the shared language of that place. Burnett said she doubled over laughing, which is basically the sound of a reset button being pressed. She also heard he took ownership with the crew in a way that surprised her. Burnett said people told her he went to a local bar where the crew often gathered after the show, climbed up on the bar, retold what had happened, and toasted her. In other words, he turned the reprimand into a public admission that she was right to draw the line. Burnett leaned into the reset with a physical reminder that was funny, but also unmistakable. She had a plaque put on his dressing room door that read, Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, turning the whole episode into a running joke that also doubled as a rule. Moods happen, but respect is non-negotiable. What Burnett and Korman said later.
He couldn't say no, or I would have broken his neck. I mean, I was just so excited.
When Burnett cracks a line like that, it's classic Carol. Sweet delivery, steel underneath, and you immediately understand how serious the moment must have been. Years later, the story gained extra weight because it wasn't only Burnett talking about it. Korman also addressed it in interviews tied to her career, and he backed up the idea that seeing Burnett truly angry was rare and genuinely startling. In his own retelling, the heart of her message was pretty blunt. If he wasn't happy on the show, he could leave, but if he stayed, he needed to show up with a better attitude. Coming from someone known for warmth, that kind of ultimatum hits even harder, because it means the situation had gone past bad day and into this can't continue. Burnett later offered a clarification that helps explain why she reacted the way she did. Korman being short with her personally wasn't the real issue. She could handle that. What crossed the line was disrespecting a guest, because that threatened the tone of the entire set and the trust that made the show work. And that's why the audience never saw a dramatic firing episode play out on camera. The blow-up happened off stage, the consequence came immediately, and the correction happened fast enough that the show kept rolling, with Korman staying on for years afterward before eventually leaving later when he moved on to his own series. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think Carol Burnett handled Harvey Korman the right way? Let us know in the comments section below.